And we're taking insights from Andrew Nevin, the Chief Economist and Advisory Partner at PwC Nigeria, here on the program today. Let's continue this conversation, Andrew. And we're just talking about the political arena and what will likely play out at states and at the federal level in the new year. But let's look at a few socio-economic issues that this administration has been battling with. Of course, these are part of the legacy issues as far as the pricing of petrol and power, what you call electricity tariffs are concerned. Now the government looking at raising minimum wage by in the third quarter. So look, these are three socioeconomic issues, burning issues that this administration has been trying to sidestep for the last 3 years, but it's got to deal with them somewhere down the line. What's your take on these three important issues? The pricing of petrol, of electricity, and the new minimum wage.
Well, I think to start with the pricing of petrol, and when the oil price dropped 28 in the 30s, we could keep the official price, and we said effectively the subsidy is over, right? But really, the government didn't make that policy because they left intact the structure. When if the price of oil rose, in effect, they weren't going to move the pump price, and that's where we're at right now. So, if oil's at $60 and the exchange rate's at 360, which is effectively where we're at, the pump price needs to be 200 naira, and it's 143. So we're back to a subsidy world. I think our view is that that's not a great place to be, and we're not sure that's a very pro-poor policy because, of course, the people that use a lot of petrol are people that are wealthier. They have a big car or filling up their car. So, in effect, while there's a lot of political agitation, the actual winners from this are richer people in the country. And of course, it's distortionary. We've had a lot of problems in getting our modular refineries going. Obviously, Dangote is bringing on the big refinery, but that's taking a while. And because this price is not the market price, it's difficult for these groups to kind of get traction. But we all know we need to refine here. So we think it would be best to totally deregulate. But of course, now we're close to the election cycle, and it's such a political issue. So it's difficult to see that happening between now and the election. With respect to power, I think our view is that we've really kind of missed a little bit of a trick in power in the technology sense. So we've all grown up in a world where we have a view of big power stations and then this distribution network. I grew up, I'm Canadian, as people know. I grew up near Niagara Falls. Massive amount of power gets distributed by big. But the thing is, the technology is changing for power, and particularly around solar power, where we've got more distributed ways. Obviously, it's produced right at where it's needed. I think that by having centralization of the power policy, we're actually missing out on what we could do. And in fact, in some ways, I mean, going back to Canada for a moment, there's no national power authority. Power is actually a provincial issue. It used to be effectively a municipal issue. Because you produce to the municipal level, they just hooked up together. If we decentralize power, I think people would invest. They're already paying for power. They're paying in diesel, they're paying in kerosene. Those are very expensive ways to get power. If they had more control over power at the local level, I think we'd see more innovative solutions. So, for example, we had the energy commissioner in the Lagos piece talking about waste to energy. That's a very innovative way to do it. If it makes sense for Lagos, where we have a lot of trash, why not do it? But do we need to get approval from Abuja? So I think that the power issue has become so politicized at this point. It's hard to make progress. But the technology is there to do it, I think, more easily than we think. With respect to the minimum wage, I mean, I think the country needs to face up to the fact that what we need is not just economic growth, we need inclusive economic growth. So, I come on the show, we always talk, is the economy growing 2%, 4%, is it shrinking, et cetera, but we forget actually more important than that growth is the distribution of income in the country. And the wealthier getting wealthier, the wealthy getting wealthier doesn't really help Nigeria. We need to have inclusive growth, pro-poor policies. So, for example, the president of Liberia has come out very clearly and said his economic policy is not so much focused around GDP, it's focused around the incomes of the poorest part of the population. So we need to do that too. So to the extent that establishing a new minimum wage, I mean, the existing minimum wage is $18,000. That's far too low by any economic measure. I mean, it's been the same minimum wage, I think, since I've lived here effectively. We've had massive inflation at that time. So there does need to be a rethink, but it all needs to be in the context of how do we increase the income levels of the bottom of the pyramid.
That takes us to this very important question for your view, Nevin, on Nigeria growing beyond the GDP. And government always seem to focus, almost always, on GDP, not on GDP per capita.
Right, so we've been very clear, and I think others are picking up on it. The CBN governor says it, I think the finance minister says it, which is we have a population growth of 2.7%. So this is either a demographic dividend or it's a demographic time bomb. But just in GDP terms, it means we need to be growing 6 or 7% a year to alleviate poverty. Growing at 4% is a minor difference. Growing at 2% like this year means we're still going backwards in GDP per capita. So this year we will have gone through the 4th year of declining GDP per capita. Now you need to ask yourself, how many years can that happen before we have a social catastrophe in the country? So in GDP terms, we need to get the number up bigger, and we need to do things that drive the spread of income. So let me give you an example. I think one of the things that we need to focus on, and Lagos State is, I believe, thinking about it, is how do we improve vocational training? So vocational training are things like masonry, electricians, carpenters, catering, auto mechanics. So these are important jobs. People need skills for it. They learn them a bit informally now. You're not always sure of the skill level. But if you have good vocational training, you then drive employment in that middle and bottom of the pyramid group. You drive incomes in that group, and that's what we need to think about, not just the high end.
Again, that in terms of where we go beyond 2018, and quite a number of online reports, agency reports that whether things are, folks seems to be a little bit clear that 2018 will still remain on that growth trajectory, but with election in 2019, no one is really sure. So there's this Reuters report that says perhaps Nigeria is a bit muddled up in the mid to long term. Do you think from a fiscal dominance side, from structural issues, do you think, and then all that, do you think the 2019 and beyond